Hi, I'm Mike Bush.
I'm Paul New.
And I'm Colleen Sterling. Welcome to Ask the A&Ps from AOPA.
Ask the A&Ps is the show where we try to solve your thorniest maintenance issues. So if you have a prickly one, send it to us at podcasts@aopa.org for a chance to get on the show.
And make sure to follow and subscribe so you never miss a poke.
A thorn. And if you'd like to get on our email list for our monthly newsletter and other good stuff, easiest way to do that is to text the word SAVVY, SAVVY, to 33777. And your phone will ask you for your name and email address and add it to our mailing list. So just text SAVVY, SAVVY, to 33777 to put yourself on the list.
So I think people need to know that the only thing about this show that's scripted is the intro. And if you think it's really bad, it's because we strayed from the printed intro.
Yeah.
So that's I don't know who writes the intros, but I don't want them to get the blame for, whatever we say.
And it's impromptu straying. It's not planned straying.
It's
so
nothing.
That's the worst part.
There's not a whole lot about this show that's planned, except all the stuff that Ian does.
Yeah.
Except that we always give the easy ones to Paul.
That's
Oh my gosh. Well, I have a sad story that has a great ending.
So much better than the other way.
Yes. My husband was out flying his Lancer, and I saw him whiz past on landing, and I'm waiting with the hangar open to help him push the plane back in, and he doesn't show up at the hangar. And I finally got on my little bike and pedaled out there, and oh my God, the airplane's pulled off on the taxiway with a truck with a flashing light next to it. And my heart starts beating, like, what happened? And it turns out he had a flat tire on rollout, and he was able to keep it going off the runway. So he didn't, block the active runway, which they appreciated. But we had to change a tire. And before Mike jumps on Dave about getting on the brakes, it's Dave claims that we looked at the tire afterwards when we pulled it off and looked at the tube, and the valve had just rotted away from the tube and split right there. And it turns out the tires were 9 years old.
Oh my goodness.
Tubes and tires. So anyway, lesson learned, those things don't last forever. But Dave said, we got to change a tire. Let's go. And, set the clock. Let's go. We ran back to the hangar. He had a mounted main tire that we used to take to the races each year, just in case this happened, and never used it. It's not something that we'd want to fly around with all the time, but he had one mounted on a hub,
spare wheel assembly. Wow.
Yeah. So we pumped that up.
Like the airlines.
I know. And we got a jack. We threw the jack in the back of the truck with the wheel, and we knew exactly what wrenches and sockets to bring, and safety wire cutters, and a vice grip to get the wheel off and get the cotter pin out. We changed that tire in under 10 minutes, and the guy was just standing there like, you guys are amazing. It was like a team. I felt like we were on NASCAR. Threw everything back in the truck. Dave taxied back and put it in the hangar and got on the computer and called up Aircraft Spruce and ordered 2 new tires and 2 new tubes, best that we could get, to the tune of over $1,000.
Oh,
ouch.
Wow.
So the tubes alone were $200 each. Can you believe that?
Oh, that's a lot.
I know. It was a Michelin Air Stop tube.
Oh, yeah.
Uh-huh.
So
anyway.
So, of course, he bought expensive tires, right?
Yes, he bought the best he could. He doesn't buy retreads or anything like that. Yeah.
Well, that's fine.
Yeah, well, he wants them to last for 9 years,
Yeah.
And he didn't go to Desser, which is where I would go, but he just wanted them the next day.
Desser isn't called Desser anymore, is it? I think
you're right.
Out
they got bought by
changed their
somebody.
name.
Yeah.
Starts with a V or something.
I don't remember.
They're not supposed to do that. If I
Keep
was
those
a
names.
private equity firm and I was going to buy out Desser Tire and Rubber, I wouldn't change the name. I mean,
No.
that's big part of the value of the company is that name. Everybody knows
Yeah.
Desert.
Yeah, and
Now
they
I
always
have no
pronounce it
idea what
dresser.
They're called VSE, Victor
Yeah.
Sierra Echo Aviation. Yeah. I didn't
That's
know
too
that.
bad.
Yeah.
Probably the initials of the billionaire that.
Or the venture capital.
So
Right.
in my Cessna classes, we have a thing on tires, and everybody always asks, well, should I buy expensive tires or cheap tires?
Mhm.
And here's my personal take on it. It depends on how long you go in between tire changes, because cheap tires dry rot at about the same rate as expensive ones. So when the tire dry rots, if you still have tread, then you paid too much for your tire.
Mhm.
If the tire wears out before it dry rots, then you bought the right tire.
Mhm.
Or depending, that's how you work it out, because cheap tires usually have thinner tread. But I've never talked about the tubes. So that's an interesting thing. You're not
the leak
required to
stop
change
tubes are-
tubes, but you
Right.
should.
Yeah, we
Oh
always
yeah,
should.
yeah.
We always do.
You can't really reuse a tube because it's gonna wrinkle.
And it's all misformed. When you sometimes you take a tube off and you inflate it, it all inflates on one side, not the other. It's real funky.
But I've always been a big fan of the Desser. I guess they're VSC now. Retreads.
Yeah.
Which seem to wear like iron, and they're dimensionally good. Never had a problem with gear retraction or anything like that.
Yeah.
Well, if you get a standard retread, it has to meet the same spec.
Mm-hmm.
I had a conversation with Desser years ago, because there's a lot of retread people that won't use them, and we had a 210 show up here about 3-4 years ago.
I think they have to comply with the TSO, which
they do, exactly, which has dimensional maximums, and so even the retread cannot exceed that TSO dimensional maximum. And so I tell this to all my customers: if you want to get a retread, that's fine. Get the proper retread. This guy shows up with his 210. And if anybody's dealt with Desser, they have a thing called monster retreads.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that is not a standard tire.
Uh-huh.
And there's a lot of airplanes you don't put that on. And the Cessna 210 is one of those. Because when you install it, it mangled the sheet metal when the gear retracted.
Oh,
those are probably those are only for fixed gear airplanes.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So just be careful with that.
Are they heavier too, Paul? They must be.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're heavier. But if you've got a flight training, like I used to put them on my 152 years ago on the mains, and holy smokes, I don't know, I went at 400 hours a year. I think they must have gone like 800 hours or something. It was amazing.
But it's funny when I first started recommending the Desser retreads for Cirrus SR22 customers. God, the mechanics would go freak out and say, "You're going to put a recap on this $1 million airplane?" And I said, "Well, the airlines use nothing but retreads."
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not, retreads aren't a bad thing. And
it's interesting. I mean, the lesson for us was, when you do a pre-flight, before you go flying, you look at the brake pads, you look at, you look for leaks around the brakes, you look at the tire tread, but you can't see the tube inside.
mm-hmm.
And having a tire on a runway is a bad day. I mean, it could have been on the runway and then they're in a rush to get it off the runway and they might damage your plane.
Yeah. Lasso it with the chain and drag it.
We were so lucky that we had the stuff. He had gotten it off the runway and it was a taxiway that they don't use a lot. So it wasn't blocking anybody. But you can't carry a tire on a rim like that everywhere. That's not part of your, emergency kit.
It's a lot of weight.
Yeah. And it takes a lot of room. We don't have the room for that.
Especially not the Lancer.
So luckily it happened at the home airport, but it could really ruin a trip if you're
Yeah.
going somewhere, you have to have a mechanic to help you. You don't have the tools.
Everybody's got to
Unless
go out and see how old their tubes are now.
unless it's Missoula. Not
Missoula.
Missoula.
No,
Where do
Sioux
we?
Falls.
Sioux Falls. Sioux
Falls.
Falls.
Well, you're
If
going to
you're
be
gonna-
paying. You're going to be paying for emergency
That's true.
support if you
Yep.
have a tire go at another airport, period. So we got lucky.
Oh, no, you were prepared.
Oh,
Okay.
Accidentally prepared.
We had fun.
I don't
It
know.
was
I think
probably-
the Sioux Falls one was a lot more fun.
not at the time.
Not at the time. That's because Mike wasn't the one stealing the tire, and
Yeah.
you know,
No, that wasn't fun.
No, the most fun was that 80-mile-an-hour drive down
With the bugs.
with the
The
bugs.
bugs hitting the windshield. Our next question is from Jason, who suspects mogas isn't a perfect fuel. Go ahead, Jason. What you got?
Yes. Before we start with that, I am not a mogas basher. I love it. I have a Peterson STC on my 63 Cessna 182. And I was running mogas for engine benefit, which I totally believe in, and human health and pollution reasons. And I was running at 100%, and that was up until May of last year when climbing out of Orcas Island out here in Washington, beautiful day. I'm going up because I want to get up away from the water. And as we're going higher, the engine just didn't seem right, didn't sound right. And my wife's just kind of talking away. And I actually said, hey, hang on a minute, like something doesn't seem right. And as we went to level off, we had a moment where the engine just stopped producing power, like it had a hiccup. And I put carb heat on, everything up, came back to life after. It was a matter of seconds when you look at the data, but it seemed like a longer time than.
Yeah, of course it did.
It always does, right? And then it started working again, and I did not touch like a single thing until it was time to descend back at my home airport, because I'm not that far away, and I said I'm just going to keep going. So we sent it in. I'm a savvy customer. We sent it in, and the folks thought that it might be vapor lock initially, which I thought was weird. It was not a warm day. The tanks were not heat soaked. I was basically climb 23-inch as long as I could hold it, and then wide open throttle when I was high enough. Fuel flows were up, and it
What
is an
altitude?
0470.
9,000.
This was at about probably about 7,500 to 8,000 is when I noticed it was just getting weird, and my level off was 9,500.
And you weren't leaning in the climb?
I was leaning, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep. So they thought that it was vapor lock and kind of pushed back, but then we're like, hey, this carb has not been touched basically since the engine was put in. You might have things going on in your carb. And my A&P, who had also looked at by that time, said like some of the basically the rods, like the control rods that are going through it, like some of them had some play in it, like maybe it is time to send this thing off. So we sent it off, got a new one back, overhauled. And when I got the plane back, it was leaking fuel. Like it was puking fuel out the intake on shutdown. And my A&P was like, yeah. And I did some research online, and online they're like, well, the 470 does that, but only on mogas. And again, I do not believe like the anti-mogas stuff. So I'm like, that's ridiculous. Sea level, normal day, normal ops. Like, why would mogas do that and not 100 low let? So we sent it off to be checked, and they sent it back, and they're like, no, really, this thing works. It's been all overhauled. Put it in. So we put it in, and first flight went up. It did the same thing. It gets weird at altitude. It gets very sensitive to throttle and carb heat inputs, even when leaned normally. It develops large fuel flow fluctuations, and this is not when it's kind of stalling on and off, because obviously, there's this carb, it's fuel into the float bowl. There's going to be a lag, like it's going to go up and down as the engine's kind of turning on and off. But even when it's like stabilized afterwards, like back in May, it has fuel flow fluctuations of almost 2 gallons per hour, just sitting there, not touching anything. And it just doesn't seem happy. It just doesn't run right. So the engine had been checked out, had a brand new carb that was thoroughly checked out. We decided we're going to run out this gas at low altitude, and it works fine at low altitude. So we ran it all out, put 100 low lead in, went up for a flight, and it was perfect. Like no issues, no fuel flow fluctuations to speak of. It was rock solid. And of course, everybody's got an opinion about mogas, like they do about what oil to use, right? So my hangar neighbor says, "Oh, you shouldn't run more than 50% mogas." And by the way, I'd had a lot of flights in the past where I can't say it was 100% mogas, but it was a lot, and I didn't have any issues even as high as like 10 and 11,500. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. I'm a little bit leery now to run 100% mogas, especially at high altitude. But wondering what your thoughts were on that.
So I'm not a mogas knowledgeable guy all that well, but isn't the high altitude vapor issue a known problem? And if you're using summertime mix, so my dad used to be in the gasoline business way back when. And they add a lot of the light ends to car gas in the summertime because it's like filler that evaporates. They don't do it in the winter as much because you can't evaporate the stuff as well. And so it's like, aren't airplanes limited to like 11,000 feet if you're on mogas, something like that?
No, sorry, I don't have anything in my STC that says anything.
Okay.
I actually pulled a Colleen on this and did a little research.
Oh, see, you guys.
I love it.
Not like me at all, but actually, Paul, you have it backwards. The mogas is more volatile than 100 low lead. It's got what's called a higher Reid vapor pressure, which is its proclivity to vaporize. And winter mix has even a higher Reid vapor pressure than summer mix does. And what can make it even more volatile is the presence of any ethanol in it, and the STC right. for the Skylane actually has no limitations and no airframe modifications. For some aircraft, there are airframe modifications involved in the STC, but not for the Skylane, not for the gravity feed fuel system. But I mean, it's clear from the symptoms that this is a vapor problem. The carburetor leakage is typically caused by what's called percolation of the fuel in the float bowl after shutdown if the carburetor is warm, which again is more likely to happen with mogas, and even more if it's the winter mix, and even more if it has an ethanol in it. There is an absolute prohibition on ethanol. And I found it's very interesting. Depending on where you live, and I didn't know that you were in Washington State, so I didn't check. But there's a cool website that you can go to, and it's called puregas.com. It's PURE-GAS. And it is a place that lists places you can buy ethanol-free gasoline, and I found it very interesting that in California, where Colleen and I live, there are only 14 places you can buy ethanol-free gas in the entire state.
Wow.
There are none in San Diego, by the way. And if you are in LA, there is one place you can buy it, and it's called SoCal Nitrous and Racing Fuel.
That's where I want to go.
But on the other hand, if you live in Tennessee, where Paul lives, there are 714 places in Tennessee where you can buy ethanol-free fuel, including 4 in Jackson, Tennessee.
Yeah.
So it varies dramatically around the country, and I don't know what the situation is in Washington State, and
there's a few around, and I did find my source there using that website. It's a great resource.
Mm-hmm.
I do get obviously ethanol free because that's required, and I do test it because I'm an untrusting person, and I make sure that it doesn't have any.
I think, that there are 40,000 airplanes using the Peterson STC, and probably another 40,000 using the EAA mogas STC, and most of them are not having a problem. So we have to figure out why you're having a problem, and the most likely reason would be that you have a fuel line that's too close to the exhaust someplace and needs either a heat shield or to be insulated or something. So I would take a look at that and see why you're getting warmed gas going into your carburetor.
And is it possible that he says he's flown plenty on mogas and not had a problem, but that one day he did, or now and then it comes and goes?
And I wonder if something changed at some point.
He said he was on a pretty steep climb to get over the water, and perhaps the airflow changed through the engine compartment caused more heat to be blowing on a fuel line.
Could be. So let me ask, kind of follow up on what Colleen is saying a little bit there. So this is just a standard 0470 installation, no mods or anything. You have an engine monitor?
I do.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of engine monitor?
It's the JPI 900, the color small one,
so
3.5.
The fuel flow transducer is mounted in a line from the gascolator wrapped around to the carburetor.
Mm-hmm.
In order to mount that, somebody has to fabricate a new fuel line, and there's no standard as to where that transducer gets mounted. Some people leave it just hanging in the fuel line so it doesn't get the vibrations from the engines. Some people hard mount it. I have a feeling that this line is close to something hot, and the airflow is changing with that high angle of attack and not getting it cooled. So I would relocate that. I think that's most likely your issue.
Okay.
It passes right.
If you can't relocate it, if you can't relocate it, you could probably heat shield it.
Yeah.
You can wrap it in. What we will often do is just wrap the transducer. Sometimes they're just left open, and we will wrap them with fire sleeve.
Fire sleeve, right.
Yep. And you can wrap the whole fuel line in fire sleeve.
Right. Yeah, you wrap it in a fire sleeve, and then you put aluminum tape over the outside of the fire sleeve. You have a pretty good.
You can't inspect it, but that's what mine are all installed like.
Yeah, I think that's where you're going to go.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then I think the carburetor leakage is when on shutdown is again caused by warm fuel going into the carburetor and percolating.
Percolating.
Yeah.
That's a fun word to use in aviation.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that insight. We'll take a look then and see if there's a line someplace.
Jason, I did look at your data. I looked at your original ticket when you first reported this problem. The data is pretty glaring. And you had our top analyst on that giving you advice. So I guess it sounds like Mike's agreeing with what he was saying.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I apologize then for pushing back at him that first time around. It would have saved me a lot of money not getting a new car. But
yeah. But I mean, events like that really shake you up. So I know I could sense you really wanted to get to the bottom of it, and you were uncomfortable flying. Like you said, flying over water like that. That must have been very exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was
not in a good way.
Yeah, my wife was.
And one other thing, which is kind of unrelated to your hiccuping problem, you mentioned that when you look at fuel flow, I guess on your JPI, you see it fluctuate quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you were getting vapor in the fuel, of course, that would get the transducer confused, and you would see fluctuations, but fuel flow into carburetors normally fluctuate as the float goes up and down. And for that reason, the JPI has a setting where you're supposed to configure it and tell it whether it's a carbureted engine or an injected engine. And if you tell it it's a carbureted engine, then it puts a big mathematical smoothing function on the fuel flow so that it doesn't wobulate up and down and drive you crazy.
Wobulate.
There's another good word for you, Paul.
That's a good
one. So you might want to check and make sure that whoever installed actually you could probably change the setting yourself. My guess is JPIs are usually pretty easy to configure. Yeah, but you might want to make sure that it's configured to be a carbureted installation instead of an injected, because the instrument will smooth the fuel flow for you.
I'm looking at his more recent data, and it looks nice. So I think maybe he's got it set up correctly. I do have to note, though, Jason, you need to replace your number 2 CHT sensor.
I know.
See, there's a problem.
Actually, yeah.
Oh, really?
Looking at your data, they start seeing stuff.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Well, we'll get that transducer protected from the heat.
Yeah, give that a try.
Yeah. We'll look at
the whole fuel line. Yeah.
Yeah. You either change the length of the lines and the location, the routing, and or cover it with some fire sleeve. Yep.
Okay. Great. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks for calling. Great question.
Yeah, good question.
I learned something about mogas. Thank you, Mike.
About how few places there are to buy it in California.
Yeah.
And I got to learn to talk about the filler in the right seasons. I get that backwards. Oh well.
Apparently, California has a regulation that where you're not allowed to sell ethanol-free mogas unless you're selling it for racing. non-street use. Like a boat or a race car or something,
or an airplane, because airplanes are the ultimate off-road vehicle,
or an airplane, right?
Interesting. All right. Well, thanks, Jason.
Yeah.
Thanks all. Take care.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
See you, Jason.
Our next question's from Brad, who is trying to right a wrong. Go ahead, Brad.
Okay. I don't know if you want the short of the long story.
Go for
basically,
it.
I fly a SR-22 with the IO550N, and I had a very high oil usage problem. I know it's unusual for that airplane.
I don't know anybody that has that problem.
Yeah, I had to take it up to. Yeah, I've heard you reference it a couple times. But I had to do a long flight, up to Minnesota. And when I'm burning a quart of oil every hour and 20 minutes, I didn't want to have to stop 4 times on the way up there.
Wow.
So I take it to the local Cirrus shop, and sure enough, we bore scope it, and the engine, the cylinder's just soaked with oil. Both spark plugs are black. There's oil pooling in the cylinder.
There's
first thing we do,
pooling in the cylinder.
Yeah. So we go after the low hanging fruit first. Intake valve guide seal. We'll do that. We do the ring flush. On the ring flush, it broke loose and it made the mess that it makes when you do that.
On
procedure.
all 6 or just one?
Just the one that was oil soaked.
You didn't do the other 5?
No, we didn't. in hindsight, we probably should have. So,
Yep.
Yeah, while you're making the mess, you might as well.
Yeah, because one of the other 5 is likely the problem.
it is, yeah. So we ended up, look at, the mechanics like, hey, let's replace the cylinder. And I'm like, yeah, let's not do that. If we don't have to, let's see what else we can do. And he's like, well, we can hone it, but that still means removing the cylinder, right? So that's what we ended up choosing to do because, cylinders were on back order and it was going to take time. So, the A&P pulls the cylinder, we re-hone it. Sure enough, it's actually a broken oil control ring.
Oh, wow.
Interesting.
So, guess we got lucky there.
Yeah.
Put it all back together and, I go to pick it up and I'm an A&P school. I should preference that. I'll let you know that. So I know just enough to be dangerous, right?
Yeah.
So I'm talking to the mechanic, like, okay, it's back together. And I know anytime a jug is pulled, that's the most invasive thing that can be done on the engine. And it's, got to be careful about it. So I start asking him about torquing of the through bolts. And I'm like, well, did you torque them on both sides? What was the process, right? And he explained to me, I torque them down halfway and then I come back through and I torque them down to the proper torque. I'm like, okay. I'm like, but on the through bolts, did you torque them on both sides or how did you do that? And he's like, well, we held a wrench on that side and, on the opposite side and the bolt didn't turn and then we torqued it down. He goes, so it should be the same torque. I'm like, that's not, but the manual says how to do it. He goes, right. Oh, no, that's just how we do it. And it's fine. I'm like, oh, okay. And now I'm sitting here scratching my head thinking like, what do I do now? Is, my engine going to fall apart, in 5 hours and 200 hours? How do I correct this? Because I know it wasn't done right,
Well, this isn't the official Continental line, but if somebody was holding a wrench on the opposite side, and nothing was moving, I would say you're fine.
Okay.
What's always bothered me about the Continental instructions about torquing on both sides is that the torque has to be a wet torque, and it's never a wet torque on the other side unless you back it off, and nobody does that. So
yeah,
to me, that's really not putting a wrench on it is, in my judgment. And I'll probably get hate mail from Mobile, Alabama now, but if you just put a wrench on it, I think that's sufficient. Don't you agree, Paul?
Yeah, I think so. We do it from both sides just because that's what the instructions say to do. It's kind of a pain, but at least that way we can say that we installed the cylinder in accordance with. And if you're going to use the proper service manual reference, and you don't follow it exactly, you have to say in accordance with, except for. So we always do it in accordance with, and as silly as it may seem, you put a torque wrench on both sides. And matter of fact, Continental made two videos in their history that I know of, and one was on cylinder replacement and one was on engine fuel system setup. And we used to have them. We can't find them. That was like 40 years ago.
Yeah, they were on VHS tape, I think.
They were, yeah. But
so even if you did have them, you couldn't play them.
You couldn't play them anymore. But what I think is more important, maybe not more important, but also important that is not required, is to replace the nuts.
Yeah.
New really hold down nuts, all 8 of them on every cylinder. Absolutely new hold down nuts, because every time you put a nut on there, it damages the threads. You can't replace the through bolt, and you're not going to replace the studs, but you can at least put a new nut on so that you're more likely to get good torques.
Okay. So with me being in the situation that I am, how would you recommend me monitoring this? Is this, or do I just take the bolts off and retorque them, or?
I wouldn't worry about it. How many hours on the engine since this was done?
50.
Around 50.
Okay.
Well, for grins and giggles, you could go out with a torque wrench and just see if they still click at the same. You're not turning it. You're not performing. I mean, you're just checking
The ones you can get to.
the ones.
Yeah,
Now you
but-
can get to the top ones.
Yeah.
But if you were doing it the Continental's way with the torque wrench on each side, the torque wrench on the other side it's just going to click. It's not going to turn anything because the threads are dry and the friction is so much higher than the one that's hopefully slathered with oil when you're torquing it down.
Yeah. Got
And
it.
if
So
you back it off to lubricate it, you're going to need to put new
Yeah.
nuts on it.
Right.
Okay. Well, I mean, that might right the wrong. It's a little bit more work, but don't know if the juice is worth the squeeze.
You can tell he's right out of school.
Yeah.
I mean, I have
would
my
be
power
inclined
plant
to
now,
leave
so I
it
am,
be, but
able to do it. But yeah.
Yeah.
And,
So-
it did fix the issue.
but
now my
but then
oil consumption is-
I'll add the usual. If it helps you sleep better at night,
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
that
then
was
you
the
can go ahead and
problem.
mess
That's
with it.
great. Yeah. Good
yeah,
job.
Yeah, oil consumption now is a quart every 8 to 10 hours.
Dang, I
So,
wish
I mean,
mine
I
was
still
that
got a little
good.
bit of oil in the other cylinders, but
Yeah.
I wish mine was that good. I don't have any broken rings, but I'm at best a quart and 3.
Oh,
But, it's still within limits.
I had a broken oil control ring once on a Lycoming, and it definitely was pooling oil and causing all kinds of weirdness in the operation. And it was really in pieces when it came off. So
Yeah.
what
You
do
got
you
All cylinders
suppose?
are going to have some oil in the bottom. And there's not a spec that says this much means that you got to take action. So it's got to be a lot of oil in the bottom to get me to pull a cylinder off.
What do you suppose causes oil control rings to fracture? 'Cause
they get jammed.
It's
Or hot, they get heated, don't
They get mine got jammed in the groove and the piston, and it broke because it wasn't moving because of
because
excessive
of
oil.
sludge formation.
The oil was coking up because that cylinder continually ran hotter than the other cylinders.
Oh,
Yeah.
So
is that the
that's
right
why
rear? Number 3?
Yes.
that's why I think there might be a case to be made for doing that solvent flush prophylactically, like every 500 hours or something,
Yeah.
just to keep
Sure.
the if you let it go too long, then you can't
Yeah.
force the solvent through. But it
That's what
probably
Ed was
wouldn't be a
recommending.
bad idea to do that, every 500 hours or something, just to keep the grooves clean and the rings free, and they're in the grooves and stuff.
Cam
let
Guard
me ask you a
Ed
question about
recommended that.
Oh, yeah. So can I ask you a question about the solvent flush?
Sure.
When I did it, I had a little bit come out the intake valve drains. Is that normal?
No.
No.
So I wouldn't get excited about it.
Okay. Yeah. So I
That
must
just-
have over rotated or something.
Yeah. It
Yeah,
wasn't sealed.
the valve must have not been fully closed, or
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
So-
because when you start with the piston at the bottom, the valves aren't always fully closed depending on which way you're rotating the crankshaft.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Brad, which school are you in?
I am in Southwestern Illinois College in Granite City, Illinois.
Yeah. Are you?
Oh.
and
Yeah, we call
are
it
you-
the Harvard of the Midwest.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are you enjoying the program?
I am. I've had 2 engine out issues that made me realize I need to learn more about how the engine works. So that's what prompted me to join the program here, and
Okay.
I
Good
can
for
come
you.
part-time or full-time. So
And what
Yeah.
do you do? What's maybe I shouldn't ask, but what do you do for a day job?
I'm retired.
Oh,
good for
so
you.
you're looking for a place to apply these wonderful skills that you're learning.
Oh,
I'm
did-
very much so thinking about it. Yes.
I don't know if you've heard about this, Brad, but we have an acute mechanic shortage in
Yeah.
general aviation.
Yeah. I'm aware. And listening to the last episode, hearing somebody talk about starting up a shop,
Yeah.
it's very interesting.
Well,
But it'd be hard to do without being an IA, I think.
Or you could
now-
just move to Jackson.
Yeah, you
And
could
now
just
that-
move to Mississippi. I mean,
now that we know
wherever you are.
that you have
Tennessee.
Tennessee, yeah.
Now that we know that you have a minimalist, reliability-centered mindset, maybe there's going to be a bidding war.
Yeah.
People want
that's my engineering degree.
Yeah. That's
engineering
good.
training. So
It's a good combination. Yeah.
Well, I
Paul,
know Southern Illinois is in need of some more good shops, or Tennessee.
Tennessee.
We've got space for you, and you don't even have to start a new shop. You just walk in and start working.
All right. Yeah. Tennessee, the taxes are pretty good there, right?
Not
Better
Texas.
than Illinois, at
Texas
least.
is terrible. No, you tell me.
Tennessee.
No, it said,
Tennessee is much better.
taxes.
Oh,
T-A-X.
taxes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sound like Rosanna Dana.
Yes.
Never mind. Yes, taxes, no income tax. There you go.
Yeah. Oh, there's none? Really?
Yeah.
Ooh.
But we have high sales tax, so we let the out-of-towners pay.
Just don't buy anything. Yeah. That's cool.
Well,
cool.
I always thought it made a lot more sense to tax consumption than income.
Yeah.
But
Yep. That way all the rich people pay more because they buy more.
They buy more.
That makes everybody happy. I mean, all the Democrats and Republicans are happy about that.
Mm-hmm.
Wait, this is not supposed to be political.
I
Never
vote
mind.
for you, Paul.
Yeah, right.
You get my vote. All right. Well, thanks.
Thank you.
Good question, Brad. Not a stupid
Yep.
question. No questions are stupid. That was a great one.
It's just
that
the
was a good
answers.
one.
Yeah, just the answers are usually kind of off, a little off. Thanks for dialing in.
Excellent. Thanks.
Thanks, Brad.
Appreciate it.
So our next question is from Rick, who has an engine with some valves that may not be behaving quite right. So what you got for us, Rick?
Well, just a little bit of background. My wife and I bought our Cessna 182G back in early 2003, and I have just over 3,000 hours on it now. The first engine,
Wow.
it was actually in the process of being overhauled when we bought the airplane, and other than one broken oil ring over 1,960 hours, it performed really well. We P-punked it, and I seem to be going through cylinders with burnt exhaust valves like there's no tomorrow. Now I'll admit that I probably babied the original engine. I know that I have a draggy airplane, a slow airplane, and basically, would typically not push it very hard. 22 inches of manifold pressure, 2,300 RPM in cruise all the time. For many years, had a single point EGT probe, and just basically look to maintain EGT value that I knew at sea level for best power, maintain that through climb, and then lean to the first point of roughness and cruise, and give it 2 turns in, and that seemed to be happy. And about 2 years before we retired the old engine, put an UBG16 engine analyzer in, and that just basically proved that tried and true method seemed to work well for me. So fast forward to the P-punk, which I absolutely love because we spend a third of the year at a 6,700 foot field elevation, and the extra horsepower is really nice. But the March 2002, March 2000, the 2021 annual with 550 hours, number 1 cylinder was pulled and repaired to a burnt exhaust valve. A year later, the number 2 cylinder, 740 hours on that, was repaired due to a burnt exhaust valve. And last year, a year ago, basically 968 hours, both cylinders 3 and 5 were replaced due to burnt valves. I did have a guy last summer replace the rotor coils on number 4 and number 6. Seemed to be a very inexpensive approach to hopefully take care of the remaining 2 cylinders that hadn't been touched. But so when we look at how I've operated the P-punk, my number 1 cylinder has been the one that I've had CHT challenges with. The others are all fine, and I guess I've really looked to keep that CHT no higher than 380, and running basically full rich, oftentimes through 7,500 feet MSL. After doing the 2 cylinders last year, I contacted Superior. I talked to their VP of product support, and he said I was probably placing way too much emphasis on the 380. That if I was, hitting 400, a couple of degrees over 400 for a few minutes, that wasn't going to be problematic. So I'd really have 2 questions. What should I change operationally to avoid, making Millennium or the Superior super rich? And number 2, what about using something like PCP as an additive to cut down on lead? Because we're pretty sure it's basically lead deposits on the valve seat that are causing the problems.
So my recommendation as an operational change is to bore scope more frequently so you catch the asymmetric burns on the exhaust valves, or not burns, but the asymmetric heat patterns before they burn, so that you can lap the valves and replace the rotocoil and not pull a cylinder. Because your burn valves have nothing to do with how you're operating the engine.
Yeah, my guess is that probably all of his valves could have been lapped, and his mechanic is just spring loaded to removing cylinders, and you need to train him not to do that.
Yeah, well, I can say I don't think he was of that ilk. I've done owner-assisted animals since the day we bought the airplane, and I've worked with this IA who is now retired and who's moving out of the area since 2007. I have somebody new that I know fairly well, and we're actually doing my first annual starting next week. So I'm looking forward to actually taking a look at the cylinders, and we did bore scope them the last 2 annuals. We did not catch anything the preceding year on the ones that had gone south last year. Last year I had about 220 hours on the engine going into.
So you need to bore scope at least every 100 hours. If you bore scope every 100 hours, you're almost certainly going to catch a valve before it turns green. And even some that have turned green, I usually don't attempt those, but if it hasn't turned green yet, it's almost 100% probability that you can save them. But you have to bore scope frequently enough to catch it early.
And you're flying too much. So,
yeah.
So that's more than I know I would never usually say that, but you need to bore scope frequently because of your flight hours.
Right. I would say at least every 100 hours.
Okay. I will probably be getting back down to about 100 hours a year from the, give or take 200 hours a year I've flown the past few years. But part of it is being retired and splitting time, amongst 3 different locations, and some of them not doing a whole lot of flying down in Mexico. It's more transportation to and from.
Well, if you're flying a lot, and I'm not an advocate of doing more maintenance for certain, but if you're doing more than 100 hours a year, it's definitely worthwhile to at 100 hours or midway through the year, something like that, pull spark plugs.
How about at every oil change?
Or at an oil change, certainly pull spark plugs, bore scope the cylinders. You need to rotate the spark plugs anyway. You need to gap the spark plugs, because if you don't, they're not being efficient. Mm-hmm. So absolutely, I would recommend that, and you could very likely even
fine wire plugs need to be cleaned and re-gapped that frequently.
No, you're not going to gap your fine wire plugs.
They need to be cleaned.
They do need to be cleaned. Yeah. They can get all kinds of lead deposits down in the bottom. Not bead blast. You're just picking the lead out of the bottom.
I rotate my fine wires, but
sure.
I don't know if it's as important as a massives.
But absolutely, you need to be bore scoping more frequently.
But, the question that I have is, okay, so he definitely could maybe have caught those valves earlier and had them lapped and avoided pulling the cylinders, but why is he burning so many valves?
Because he's got crummy rotocoils.
Okay.
Well,
Okay. I mean,
there are
that's
various
how,
reasons, but it doesn't sound to me like his valve problems are particularly premature for a Continental engine. Continentals burn valves, Lycoming stick valves. That's just the way it is,
okay.
And
Okay.
and the burn valves, we have some very interesting statistics. And Paul and Colleen, I'm not even sure we've ever talked about this, so this may be new to you guys, but since we launched the Borescope initiative at the beginning of 2024, we've had a little over 100,000 Borescope images uploaded to our platform. And of those a little over 100,000, about 70,000 of them have been looked at by our analysts. So they looked at a lot of images and a lot of exhaust valves. And we discovered some interesting things. About 7 or 8% of the exhaust valves we looked at exhibited signs of heat distress at some level or other. About 25% of the engines, because an engine has 4 or 6 cylinders, about 25% of the engines had at least one exhaust valve that was heat distressed, which was a surprisingly high number to me. But the good news was that about 85% of the heat distressed exhaust valves we looked at were in what we call early stage heat distress, which would be just excellent candidates for lapping. And only about 15% of them were considered late stage. And of course, even those are probably worth trying to lap. But cylinder removal was unnecessary in 85% of the cases. And cylinder removal has been the standard of care traditionally. You see a exhaust valve problem, you pull the cylinder, and we need to train our mechanics not to do that, because 85% of the time they don't need to do that. And as Paul said,
having participated in R&R on 4 cylinders, it's not a job that I look forward to doing.
Right.
No, and what's worse is there's significant risk involved in doing that. We've seen a fair number of catastrophic engine failures shortly after cylinder work. There's just a lot of ways to screw it up, and a cylinder installation. It's not the removal; it's the hard part. But yes, installing a cylinder has to be done perfectly. And we've seen cylinders come off because the hold downs weren't properly torqued, particularly through bolts. We've seen cylinders come off because there was sealant or paint or something in the flange and deck area that caused the preload to go away after a while. And we just don't like seeing pulling cylinders is kind of like open heart surgery on an engine, and we don't want to do it if we don't have to. And it turns out we don't have to an awful lot of the time.
So operationally, am I putting too much emphasis on my hottest cylinder?
Yes, you are. I agree 100% with what the guy from Superior told you. Who that guy was probably Bill Ross. I wouldn't be surprised.
Yes, it is.
But first of all, the Superior cylinders tend to run a little hotter than the Continental cylinders do, in terms of CHT, and that's okay. That's just the way they are. And we don't really start getting interested in CHT unless the number starts with a 4. So I wouldn't. There's no reason to go to heroic efforts to try to keep the CHT below 380 degrees. That's overly conservative. And for Lycomings, it's I would add 20 degrees to that. Lycomings, we don't get excited until the CHTs start to get up above 420 or 425.
And the 182 does have a problem with cooling as well. So it's very, very difficult in a high power climb to keep them below 380.
Yeah, I don't seem to have a problem with the other 5 cylinders, but my number 1, it heats up quickly and it cools down quickly. And
there's always got to be one.
We've gone over the baffling. We're going to go over it again, next week as we, go through the annual. But what about using TCP?
Using what?
TCP.
Oh.
TCP.
Well, I mean, normally you can control lead just by leaning properly, but if you feel like you've done all you can, and I mean, normally we would recommend TCP for people who are having, problems with lead-fouled spark plugs and stuff that they just can't seem to resolve. It's. Go ahead, Colleen.
I mean, the question he had is Bill Ross said you should not lean. You should lean more, right? Because you're putting too rich mixture in, and it's putting deposits on your exhaust valves. Is that something you would agree with? That could be addressed with TCP.
Well, TCP would be a Band-Aid for,
But does lead really deposit on the seat and the valve seat?
Oh,
yeah,
it does. It sure does.
That's that white stuff, that lead oxide.
So Rick needs to run leaner.
Yep.
Rick needs to not worry so much about his temps until they get above 400. And Rick could consider TCP as a mandate.
And I actually, at one point, I winced a little bit when Rick talked about leaning to the onset of roughness and then turning it in 2 turns.
That's a lot.
The onset of roughness part was great, but the turning it in 2 turns is putting it,
just
probably
until
where you
it runs
don't
smoothly
be.
is what you want, right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. You really like to operate it as lean as you can, without the engine being unacceptably rough.
The other thing, if you have one cylinder that's a significant outlier,
which is guaranteed in an 0470.
That's true. Especially on carbureted engines and 182s, I always like to do an in-flight induction leak test because you can have induction leaks and they're just often not detectable in the shop. And well, first off, nobody's looking for them in the shop. And you can end up with a lean outlier, and in climb, that could be significant.
Paul, what's your experience, if any, with the P-Punks? Do they have a greater mixture maldistribution than a standard 470?
I haven't seen enough of those. Now, if you go with the bigger engines, the one with the 520 cylinders and all that, they have all kinds of issues.
Well, that's what the P-Punk is. It's a four.
Well, but
it's
he said
520 cylinders on a 470.
That's right. I saw 0470 and my brain.
Yeah, but he P-Punked it. I didn't know P-Punking was a verb.
It's a verb.
I learned it's a verb.
So
yes.
It's a carbureted 520.
Yes, and absolutely, this is a really common issue on the P-Punks. I get lots of calls. I get called in on a lot of the savvy tickets because it's a Cessna, and if it's a peacock, it's going to have CHT issues. They're not balanced well, and I don't know that the induction is always the problem, but for whatever reason, CHTs or imbalanced CHTs are. We should be able to do. We ought to get Chris to see if he can do a cohort for the peacocks and see if they have CHT wide
imbalance. A greater mixture imbalance.
Yeah, I think that'd be worth looking at, because anecdotally, I would say they do.
Yeah, I think we took a look at one time at Texas Skyways does a similar thing where they instead of what they do is they carburate an IO 520. They make it an O 520, which is kind of the same result as a peapod, and but they get to it in a different way. And those things had really miserable mixture distributions.
Yeah. I guess the main reason to carburate these is they don't have a header tank. I mean, I'd much rather have a fuel injected engine.
Yeah, Texas Skyways has also a conversion of the Skylane to fuel injection, but it's much more complicated.
Right. Yeah.
I'll bet.
Because the Skylane doesn't have any return fuel lines.
No return fuel lines. No header tank.
And it doesn't have a double decker fuel selector and all the stuff you need to.
That makes it expensive.
Yeah.
Oh well. Well.
Do an induction leak test, Rick.
Yeah, do an in-flight induction leak test. You find that on the Savvy site. It's a fun thing to do anyway.
And lean aggressively, and don't let your mechanic pull cylinders when you have burned valves. Lap them, and always change your rotocoils.
Yeah, I've always been actively involved in that discussion, and every time the valves have had a terrible color distribution and green crescent shapes on there. So there's no question.
Yeah, there's no question that they're burned, but if you looked at them earlier, you can solve the problem. That's my point.
But even if the color distribution looks terrible, if you open the valve and bore scope the sealing surfaces and they don't look horribly eroded or the valve doesn't look warped, it's still worth trying to lap the valve. We've had really good luck with valve lapping. It's amazing.
It's almost 100%.
I will absolutely keep that one in mind, and I'll go back to pretty much the way I used to lean and climb, and just enriching it a little bit to smoothness, not 2 turns.
There you go. Just a little smooth. You got it.
All right. Good luck with that. Yeah.
Thanks for the call, Rick.
But the burn valves are not your fault, Rick.
That's right. Yeah. You didn't.
They don't have anything to do with how you're leaning it, and there's not a correlation between CHT and valve burning.
It's Continental's fault.
Thanks, I appreciate that.
Okay. All right, Rick.
Okay, so we actually have a ton of letters this time, which I'm really excited about. So wanted to first talk about the A&P shortage. Actually, that was the number one subject that we were written on. So people wanting to become techs or have ideas for the shortage or whatever.
And you just sent all those people my phone number, right? That wanted to become techs? Okay.
Yeah.
Move to Tennessee. So this is from Chris. He says he's been an avid listener and has heard many discussions about the A&P shortage. As an aircraft owner, it's something I've been concerned about for a long time, which is why I was excited when my son Ethan decided to become an A&P. He's been working in the maintenance department for a local flight school for several years. But after his graduation from A&P school in 2024, he expressed the strong desire to stay within GA rather than go to the airlines.
Yay.
Yeah.
In fact, he had multiple interviews and job offers with 121 carriers, all of which he turned down.
Good for him. Wow.
Ethan's very entrepreneurial, and after talking with him and my good friend Todd Minton, we decided to start a mobile maintenance business based at MKC, which is a cool airport.
Outstanding.
Wow.
Yep. So
That's
Ethan
impressive.
identified the first hire, and the two of them have been generating more business than they can sustain after
Sure.
officially opening doors on January 1st.
Wow.
So he does
That
go
is
on. He talks about a little bit of a frustration, which is that something that, Paul, I know you know very well, which is that aircraft owners are cheap. That
I know
There are
that well too.
There are certain aircraft model owners that are cheaper than others. I won't get into that.
Oh, that's interesting. Well, it's funny. He actually talks about a Bonanza owner. I don't know if that has might relate to something you were just saying.
I'm not calling anybody out.
I can't draw you out. Okay. Who basically told him he wasn't going to pay anything over $70 an hour.
So my number one advice, if you want to get rid of the customers that you don't like, the best thing you can do is raise your
prices. Yeah.
So it is not the mechanic's job to make flying affordable. That is my mantra. Yeah. Your mechanic's job is to stay in business and do good work.
Well, the other thing is that there's almost no correlation between hourly shop rate and invoice total.
Yeah, right.
In fact, there can be an inverse correlation.
Yeah, right.
That's a great point. I mean, it's hard for an owner though if you can go in there thinking, okay, I'm going to pay for expertise and I'm going to pay more per hour. You sort of assume you're going to pay more total, but you make a good point. It's like if you're paying somebody with the expertise to troubleshoot properly, maybe ultimately you'll pay less.
They don't waste your time.
Yeah. I've got 2 emails right now on Cessna 210 landing gear stuff, and it's from an owner, or not the same owner, different owners, asking questions because their mechanic has already spent all kinds of hours, and their mechanic is in on the email. So it's not like, the mechanic is saying, look, this is past me, I need some help. And within usually a few minutes, we've troubleshot the problem and they go fix it. So it's a matter of finding the right person.
Right.
Now, Colleen could have charged $500 an hour for that tire change on Dave's airplane, and the invoice total still would have been chump change compared to the cost of the
call
parts,
out,
right?
Yeah,
that's
or
right.
the parts, yeah.
Good point. All right, so this is from Lenny. We had Lenny on the show. Let's see, maybe a year and a half ago now. He was interested in becoming an A&P, was looking for advice, I think, on how to proceed. He said he wanted to follow up and say he's passed the last of his oral and practical exams.
Yeah.
He's now a licensed A&P.
Yeah.
Your show was a bigger part of it than you know. I've listened to every show, and I know it helped me understand so many things. And better yet, I was able to explain and think through problems because I've been fortunate enough to listen to experts. Many thank you to Mike, Paul, and Colleen.
That's so
awesome.
Cool. I love it.
That is really cool. Congratulations,
Lenny. Yeah.
Paul, he is not yet looking for a job. Just FYI, he's got.
That's the bad news.
Tease.
Yep. So
you gave the good news first. Now the bad
news. All right. So Doug is writing about the call. It was last time or 2 times ago about the experimental owner who was asking about the repairman certificate. And then the privileges and limitations of that. And so Doug says, as a former aircraft owner and current flying club member, I'm really enjoying your show. I have a comment on your recent answer to an RV-14 builder who was the repairman certificate for the airplane and was wondering if the maintenance he'd done was legal. He said, your answer danced around, but didn't answer the question directly. With experimentals, maintenance work is simple. Anyone can perform maintenance on an experimental. Builder, current owner, man on the street, anyone. The only exception to this is signing off on the condition inspection that requires either the repairman or an A&P. Hopefully the caller isn't looking over his shoulder for the FAA, as they won't be coming.
Well, there you go. That's the only time I would ever dance.
Yeah.
Is around a maintenance question?
Dancing around a maintenance question.
But he stated that very well, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, so to do maintenance on an experimental, all you'd have to have is a pulse, but to sign off on the condition inspection, you either have to be the builder with a repairman certificate, or you have to be an A&P, but not an IA, just an A&P.
Yep, great. And so this one's from Mark, and he says on a recent Ask the A&Ps podcast, the subject of safety wire caliber came up. I realize it was in the context of Macaulay propellers, but for what it's worth, Hartzell specifies 32 thousandths safety wire, at least for my constant speed prop. he says his is based on it's on a Lycoming IO 390, and it's specified as that in the Hartzell propeller owner's manual. My local A&P insisted on the heavier gauge 41, and afterwards I vowed to myself never use that stuff again. After
Yeah, it's very hard to work with.
And found that 32 thousandths was not only acceptable, but 41 thousandths wasn't even mentioned. I enjoy the show.
So
I've never heard the word caliber used in connection with safety wire before. I thought that was kind of cool.
Gauge.
Yeah,
It's gauge.
sometimes gauge. Yeah. There are propellers, Hartzell propellers, that are installed with the 41 thousandths. It depends on the aircraft application. So don't just assume that all are 32. And 41 can be done. But you have to check. And sometimes you won't find it in the propeller manual. You'll find it in the airframe manual. So you have to start at the airframe manual. If it doesn't give you a number, then go to the propeller manual.
Is that why I've always used 41 thousandths on my Cardinal?
Yeah, so check.
Yeah.
Because that's 41 for a two blade. On your engine is 41. If you
That's
go to
what I thought. Okay.
Yeah, if you go to a three blade, suddenly you can use 32.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, but check your airframe book first, because that's going to be controlling. If it doesn't say, then you can use the prop.
Excellent.
So the safety wire is not what holds the prop on, right?
No, it's the bolts. It's true.
It just makes sure that when everything comes apart, all the pieces will be together.
That's right.
Yeah.
The accident investigators will be able to locate all the components.
That's right.
Exactly.
So our next question is from Adam, whose engine went boom. That's not quite the right sound, I would think. Clang or bang, something like that.
Yeah, we don't like that sound.
Well, tell us what happened, Adam.
Yeah, so let me just start by saying I'm a load time pilot of 300 hours, and I don't know a whole lot about plane engines. So I hope I'm not over my head here. But I bought an SR20 G6 a few years ago, and I have it in the flight school on Leaseback. And back last year, during a lesson that I was not in the plane for, they were climbing they were taking off about 900 feet, and they heard a bang, and oil pressure started dropping. There was partial power loss, and they were able to land it back to the runway, fortunately. The engine was still running at shutdown, but apparently it had been oil pressure had been zero for about, I don't know, a minute and a half or so. They pulled the engine. The plane had 500 hours on it at the time. They pulled the engine, sent it back to Lycoming. And you guys have the report from the IRAN they did. It was AOG for about 6 months. And then actually after I got it back, which was this past February, less than 100 hours, the cylinder 3 failed compression. It was like less than 30 apparently, and so they pulled that cylinder, sent it for an IRAN, and you have that report as well.
Why did they do that?
It's I don't know. I mean, it sounds like there were valve issues, but I don't really understand exactly
why did they pull it as opposed to doing something else like staking the valve or
Like
anything else.
lapping the valve or
service instruction 388C, I believe.
Yeah, there's a whole list of things to do.
The Lycoming tells you what to do, but I don't know why mechanics are just so spring-loaded to pulling cylinders.
So, and I know you're not, I don't think you're finished with your explanation, but
No.
this seems kind of odd. So I had an IO 540 Lycoming, which is similar to this one. And we saw exactly when the engine lost oil pressure after a 3-hour flight, and it flew in cruise for 7 minutes.
Yeah.
after the oil pressure drop. And you're saying this happened at 900 feet right after takeoff. That's
Yeah.
just amazing that it
Very short.
vacated the sump that fast, and then the engine seized that fast. That seems like a lot.
Yeah, well,
Did the engine seize?
it
Well,
did
or
not seize.
came apart.
It
It
did not
didn't seize. Sorry,
Yeah,
came
yeah.
apart.
Yeah.
What they call that? Unscheduled rapid disassembly.
Disassembly.
Yeah.
I love
It's
it.
funny. It's funny now, Paul. It
It's
wasn't
funny in
funny.
That's
retrospect.
true.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I guess, there's a lot of questions. But I've heard a lot of stories about issues with the 390 and amongst other Cirrus pilots. And I've heard about, I haven't heard a lot of failures in flight, although there was a recent one. But a lot of repaired cylinders in the flight school between the three SR-20 G6s they have. They've replaced like 6 cylinders in the past couple of years, and all with valve issues. And I'm also told it tends to be the number 2 and 4 cylinders, but I don't know. But I think the question is really, like, in a flight school environment with this particular plane, how do you mitigate against? I mean, the plane appears to be, or the engine appears to be, very sensitive to leaning procedures and valve sticking, and we're constantly stressing it to the people that are in the school and renters, and none of us are sure what to do to make it make the problem any better.
A different maintenance attitude, I think, is the first priority.
Well, but
Really?
but the maintenance, we have a problem with removing the valves instead of unsticking them, but
Right.
that's
valve sticking is just a fact of life in all Lycoming engines. It's simply a design issue with the engines. Lycoming recommends doing this wobble test. The 388C, I think, is the service bulletin, every 400 hours, or 300 if it's a helicopter engine, I learned.
Yeah. Or 1,000 if you didn't have the new guides.
Or 1,000. Yeah. When you say the new guides, are those the NIRESIST guides? Are those the ones that are considered new? Or
I think so. Yeah, they're supposed to be harder. They don't bell mouth as easy.
So that's preventative maintenance that you could be doing to prevent an in-flight failure.
But the other thing that I think is just super important is that for everybody who flies those airplanes, particularly the flight instructors, to be trained to detect morning sickness,
right?
Which is usually the first sign of a valve sticking problem. Right. Is when you first start the engine cold, and only 5 out of the 6 cylinders light up at first.
You'll
and the
feel
engine
it.
is rough, and people tend to assume that it's a plug fouling problem, but it isn't. It's a valve sticking problem. The valves will always stick the worst when they're cold. Or the real worst is when they're hot and the cylinder cools down quickly, which happens a lot in the training environment, because you're doing touch and goes and stuff, and you're going from
power back to power on. Yeah,
exactly.
Right.
And when you pull the power back on the cylinder, the cylinder head contracts. The the cylinder head and the guide cool down a lot faster than the valve does. and so again, that's going to aggravate the sticking problem.
That's a bad time to happen, I guess.
But
touch and goes. Yeah.
Right.
But detecting morning sickness on the first start of the day and writing it up and doing something about it right away, and also doing the wobble test. Or Paul said he used to maintain a fleeted chair case. He didn't even bother doing the wobble test. He just reamed the valve guide.
Yeah.
Just
reamed the guides.
and be done with it.
Yeah.
But then he was really fast at it. He got really good at it.
Adam, your plane is in a leaseback, so it's hard to do. But for my 3 Lycoming equipped airplanes, every time I fly, I download the data, and the first thing I look for is any sign of a valve that doesn't come up right away, like a lagging EGT that I might not have felt. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, you might not even feel it, but it might be there. And I'm just watching because I'm just waiting for morning sickness on my engines.
Yeah, believe me, I do that now.
You're aware.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you want to educate the flight instructors, the other people that are flying.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And we've been sending out regular bulletins. We've really pushed the education on that. And the scary thing about morning sickness is, right, you shut it down and restart it and everything's fine. So people talk themselves into, it's no big deal.
They want to go. Sure.
Did they read these bulletins?
And leaning aggressively will help because the valve sticking problem is due to deposit buildup. So the leaner you operate, the slower the deposit buildup. So that will help.
So a long taxi that's rich can be bad, right?
Yeah. So I think we're in correct me if I'm wrong, but we're in South Florida, so it's hot. We have long taxis usually. Yeah. And so it's a bit of a setup for that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and we've started, there's also a procedure for sort of a run up immediately before shutdown to clean to clean the
deposits.
I mean, does it actually clean the deposits?
I always thought that was a bad idea. That was Lycoming wrote that up, and that always struck me as
I've never done it. Yeah,
just being very inconsiderate to whoever is behind you when you do it.
Well, if you're taxiing and typically Cirrus people taxi at 1,000 RPM because they like to use their brakes and drag their brakes all the time.
I knew a joke was coming in there somewhere.
Yeah. Well, I fly as Cirrus, and I still have the same brake pads I had on my airplane when I bought it 6 years ago. Because I only use them basically to stop the airplane. Anyway, beside the point. And if you're at 1,000 RPM, the spark plugs are going to be warm enough that lead fouling is minimal. And if you lean in the taxi, you pretty much avoid it altogether. My airplane, of course, it's a 22, and it's a flying experiment. And just for grins, I never lean on the ground. And I have yet to have a fouled spark plug. Now, I'm not recommending that. I'm doing it on purpose to see.
Shame on you. You said
I know,
that example.
Well,
don't do as I do, says Paul.
Yeah, that's as I said, my airplane is a bit of a flying experiment.
But then again,
I'm not flying with you.
You're not flying a Lycoming, so you're not worried about sticking valves.
Right. It's totally different engine.
Okay.
But I mean, but on your airplane, that's what I'm saying. If you're going to be taxiing at 1,000 RPM and leaning, then lead fouling of those spark plugs is kind of just a non-issue. So doing that run up at the end, I don't think is any value at all.
Yeah, I don't know. We heard a flight school out in Washington said that they were having some valve issues, and they started doing that on their 20s, and they stopped having them. So I mean, unless you think it will hurt the plane.
I don't
No,
think it hurts.
it'll just hurt whoever's in the next tie down row behind you.
It'll piss off your hangar neighbors. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
We don't worry about that. Okay,
Now I know.
we,
But
it's a flight school.
Training the people on detecting morning sickness, doing the 388C wobble test religiously.
Yeah.
And leaning as aggressively as possible, particularly on the ground.
Agreed.
I
think the written bulletins is not effective because, you know, a lot of people just, there's another company memo and they toss it. I think a verbal would be
With the
way
flight
more helpful.
instructors.
Yeah, with the flight instructors. Just have a chit chat, you know.
What about use of a lead scavenger? I guess I don't think Lycoming recommends it, but
yeah, you can add TCP or Decalin or something to the fuel to help as with the scavenging beyond what's in the 100 low lead.
Okay.
I think if you could run those engines on unleaded fuel, that would be even better. But those the IO390 is a high compression engine, so you can't run auto fuel in it.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I really appreciate the feedback. Thank you, guys.
Yeah.
Glad
Good
your
to see
plane's
you.
okay. Yeah.
Yeah. And
We'll be watching for you.
It must be nerve-wracking to own an airplane that all these other people are flying.
Yeah.
It is. It's definitely made me a little wary flying her, so which is a bummer.
Yeah, I've often heard it said that, you know, the leaseback is worse than a marriage. It's just it's really hard to make it work.
Communications are a problem.
Yeah.
Just pre-flight it well.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, thank you guys. I appreciate it.
Okay.
Yeah, Adam. Enjoy.
Thanks for coming on, Adam.
Take care.
Well, it's definitely time to shut this show down before you hit us with a question that really stumps us. I'm not sure how many of you lasted until the end of this episode, but we'd like to thank you for hanging in there to the bitter end. We can't do this without you. So please send us your gnarliest questions. We might just have an answer. Email us at podcast@avpa.org.
I made it all the way to the end.
Yeah.
See you guys.
Bye-bye, everybody.